was part of the Harvard African Law Association, which Afia helped to found during her time as a law student there. And that, that's something that's, I know, given a lot of platform to Africans graduating from the school, and definitely going to speak to some of that in her work with Llms as well. But, would like to pass it over to start to Afia, just to introduce yourself. We know you're the head of legal at Google Health, but there's so much more to you, and would love to just hear a little bit more about kind of your story and background before commencing with questions.
Fantastic. Well, I'll begin by saying I'm very, very excited to be here and have this conversation. So I want to thank the African Innovation in Law Center Club for inviting me, and Meme for agreeing to facilitate this conversation. As Meme said, my name is Afia Asamoah. I was born in Ghana. Immigrated to the States when I was very young. I was about 8 months. My dad was a doctor, and he won the visa lottery. And so that brought him to Newark, New Jersey in 1977. And my mom followed with me about 8 months later. In terms of my background, maybe due to the fact that my dad was a doctor and that's the way we got to the States, my maternal grandfather was a pharmacist in Ghana as well. Healthcare has always kind of been in my world and identified by myself as a passion. And I always want to kind of figure out how I can contribute in healthcare. And when I was young, probably similar to most folks, when you think about healthcare, you think about being a doctor. So that's what I wanted and aspired to do. So I went to Harvard College. I was pre-med. Spent some time actually, which changed the course of my direction in healthcare just a little bit, going to Ghana by myself. So up to then, I'd gone back to my family regularly because we still have very, very large extended family in Ghana. But when I was a sophomore summer in college, I got a fellowship to go do public health work with a bunch of other students in Ghana. And there I left feeling, yes, very certain that I wanted to do something in healthcare, but actually started having some questions around whether I wanted to be a doctor as the means to do that. I was more interested in kind of healthcare access, healthcare delivery, wanted to figure out ways in which I could get more healthcare access to people in Ghana and the developing world, frankly. So I decided not to apply to med school. I worked with a bunch of lawyers doing healthcare work, healthcare policy in the States. We were doing Medicare policy, and that set me on the course to law. I would say that kind of where I've arrived is that I believe very deeply in the promise of healthcare technology. It's part of the reason I'm at Google. I think if it's done right, it can increase access, it can increase quality for all people. But I equally believe that if it's not done thoughtfully, if there's not diverse perspectives around the table, if people are not asking the right questions and be really intentional about it, I think it can exacerbate inequity. It can make things worse for people. And so my belief in how technology brought me to Google 8 years ago. I moved out to California. And as you said, Meme, I'm currently the head of legal at Google Health.
Wow, that's an excellent journey. People see doctor, lawyer as two things, almost, dichotomies versus, kind of going smoothly between the two and kind of focusing not on the direct work, but on the impact you can have on the different kind of societies you want to impact. I think that's beautiful to hear. Awesome.
Yes.
I do want to pivot a little bit for the audience, though. A lot of the membership of the Innovation Law Club Africa are law students and young lawyers on the continent. And I know a lot of what they think about when it comes to kind of working and potentially in a company like Google. A first step would be an LLM, a master's, a lot of time in kind of a foreign school. And so for the folks thinking about that, I know you went through law school and you were part of a group who actually started, I think it was founded by LLMs, but founded the Harvard African Law Association. And I think it'd be good to speak a little bit to, the ingenuity of those, kind of LLM students you were with there, kind of best practices you've seen from African LLMs doing studies in the United States, doing kind of legal masters, and just any other notes or words of advice to folks.
Yes. So love to speak about HALA, the Harvard African Law Association, which was founded in 2001. As you said, Meme, it was really founded by the core was LLMs. And there were three law students that were part of that founding class. One of them served as vice president And then 2 of us served as ex officio JD members. And I would say my experience with LLMs at Harvard, and just from observation as well, is that LLMs realize they have a really limited time, right, in the law school environment. And the ones that thrive and kind of make the most of the experience are ones that are kind of entrepreneurial and kind of willing to reach out to develop relationships and kind of maximize the limited time they have at Harvard. So the group of LLMs that started Hala, we met via the existing association, the Black Students Association, Black Law Students Association. And our feeling was, yes, we're Black, that's part of the experience, but we thought that we could add an additional dimension. We knew we could add additional dimension, and we thought it was needed with respect to kind of legal issues from the African continent. And so that was the genesis for thinking about starting Hala. And then also realized it was just a great opportunity to expose people to like the breadth and the beauty of the African continent, frankly. So we started with a business roundtable where we invited African scholars, legal scholars to contribute, to come and actually have a conversation with not only Hala members, but the broader law community. We evolved to have like Africa nights, so we could show people the kind of like food and culture and music of Africa. And that drew a huge crowd, not just at the law school, but frankly at the undergrad and other graduate schools as well. And then we partnered with the Black Law Students Association and planned a trip to Africa. So we went, during my years, we focused on South Africa. So we did Namibia and Botswana, where we went and kind of met with government officials and lawyers in those environments, and just kind of figured out how law was practiced, kind of used for social justice ends in those communities. So I feel very passionate about Hala. I think your question about like the tips for LLMs is realize you're there a short time and the time goes quickly. I think folks that got the most from the LLM experience clearly have to do good work, but it was really relationships. Because relationships, frankly, in my career have been the ones that have gotten me my really awesome opportunities. And I think as an LLM, you kind of have to hustle a little more to land a job after you graduate. And so using the time there to not only meet fellow law students, but frankly, people more generally at the school, at different schools, graduate schools, is also very helpful.
Awesome. No, I think that's beautiful. And yeah, I mean, I think you can have lasting impact even in that 1 year as an LLM, as kind of that story tells. And no, that's really good to hear. And I think the audience appreciates those notes. We might even be having some questions coming there too. But I know we're flying all over the place, but there's a lot to talk about. You are the head of legal for Google Health. That is huge.
Yes.
It's Google. What is it like every day, leading legal at one of the most influential companies in the world, not to mention that it's Google Health during a pandemic. We don't have to dive into any of the IP, but just kind of personally, what does your day-to-day look like? What's it like?
Yes, so it's so I've been fortunate to have kind of several dream jobs in my career, and coming to Google actually was like a leap of faith for me. So as I mentioned in my introduction, I came to Google 8 years ago when back then, now health tech, digital health, it's a thing. It's not even kind of remarkable for people to think about technology companies moving into healthcare space. But 8 years ago, it wasn't that common. And so Google had a small team of software and hardware engineers working on medical technologies, and we're looking for a lawyer to kind of support that. And that's how I came to Google eight years ago. It was very much kind of a leap of faith to join a very small team, with some faith and prayer to God that it was the right choice, that it was actually an area in which Google wanted to like grow and invest in, and they were seriously being committed. The job itself, as you said, it's a privilege to work at Google, because I do think this without kind of very humbly, that there's few companies that have the reach and scale to actually be incredibly impactful in healthcare for all people. And I feel very, and as I said, like I'm very, very passionate and determined that when healthcare is built, when healthcare technology is built, it should not just be built for people that have access to technology. We should be thoughtful in terms of like building healthcare for everyone. So Google Health's mission is to help everyone live more life every day. So I have the privilege of working at a company and a business unit that matches my kind of mission and my purpose very, very closely. The work itself, it's a combination of working with a lot of software and hardware engineers that have never worked in healthcare before, frankly, but are really smart, really dedicated, really passionate, and kind of want to do innovation in healthcare. So it's a fun conversation in terms of kind of co-creating, right? They ask a lot of questions as to why is it done this way? And it kind of forces you as the lawyer to think carefully as to whether there's like a good justification for the way that things are set up. And if there is, your job is to explain and kind of co-create them and help them figure out a way to build a product to meet that need. And if it's not, it is a opportunity to kind of work with our policy colleagues, frankly, to kind of figure out if you can kind of shape the legal and regulatory landscape in a way that makes sense for innovation. The vast majority of the work, though, is looking for answers and not finding any, right? Because the work is so innovative and cutting edge, and usually with technology, just not in healthcare, but technology generally, right? It usually like runs ahead of where the regulations and the law is. So I find like me and my team, our job is to be ethical, be responsible, kind of anticipate where we think the regulatory landscape is going, where we think it should go, and counsel our clients in that direction.
Would you say that because the global pandemic almost made your job easier because it's easier to kind of show why you need to kind of make these changes in regulations or things like that, or harder just because everything's on fire and your head's down? Or...
Yes. So I'm gonna say both, but maybe probably more the former. So for us, like the story of Google Health is that although I've been doing healthcare at Google for 8 years, Google didn't create a business unit dedicated to health. So Google Health is only 2 years old. I've been doing healthcare at different companies under the Alphabet umbrella. So there's Verily Life Sciences, that's where I was working. There's Calico, but Google Health is relatively new. So I say that in the sense that the pandemic I felt like it was accelerant, frankly, to health technology within Google, because for a moment in time, everyone at Google was figuring out how you can use Google technology, Google Maps, Google Search, YouTube, I mean, everything to make an impact and kind of be helpful in this pandemic. So it was an accelerant in terms of we no longer had to sell that Google, kind of given who it is, the resources at its disposal, and its ability to kind of develop fantastic technology, could do something really impactful and helpful in healthcare. So that was fantastic. I would say for my team, so my team is a team of 12. Most of us are based in the States, but I have someone based in London and someone else based in APAC, in Singapore. So a team of 12 trying to consult and advise literally a company of like over 120,000 people trying to do something in healthcare, or like almost crushed us. Like it was just too much work. So during that time, excitement that people were realizing that technology in healthcare could be really impactful. And for me as a leader and manager of my team, figuring out how you can scale that work, how I could responsibly help the company, frankly, advise them as they're moving in an area where there weren't any rules of the road, really, right? There were like enforcement discretion and laws coming out left and right, but there was no rules of the road in terms of how to do this. Doing so in such a way that didn't burn out my team, so that I still have the same team like a year and a half later, right? I was very concerned in the middle, kind of in the middle of last year, that the work would just be too much and not sustainable for us to keep up with.
No, that is fascinating stuff, especially around kind of the effects on COVID. And I can imagine Google being such a flat organization, kind of something like this happens and it shifts focus. It's got to probably be weird to pivot, almost kind of informal kind of power coming in from that perspective. But that's very interesting. I guess on another facet of working, you are working in Silicon Valley in the tech space, which is known for being, especially in the US, kind of less diverse. There's probably less Africans or African Americans working there, and you've been able to, rise the ranks and have great success. For others looking to emulate that, maybe in kind of regions outside of their home countries, maybe in places where they may not look like everyone. Do you have any tips or tricks or advice for folks that are looking to do that?
That's such a good question. And frankly, it's one that I've had to kind of evolve throughout my career. And kind of where I've landed is that showing up the way we look, we're not going to blend, and just accepting that. And I think there's a recognition that for me, I am also a very private person. And I have found that looking the way I look, right? Like being the one or the very few in the room, coupled with being a very shy person, is not the way to kind of rise through the ranks, being quite frank. Most of the environments I've been in government, in private sector, both at the law firm and at Google, like they thrive on relationship. And so I found that I just need to share more of myself. I need to spend the 2 minutes at the beginning of a meeting asking people what they did over the weekend and being willing to kind of share more about myself. Frankly, I just have learned to be more vulnerable. And I think that's actually been helpful to me, because the way I said two things. One, I think the way that you kind of rise to the ranks in a company is that people know you, have relationships for you, and frankly are willing to kind of speak up for you when you're not in the room, to kind of give you opportunities that you might not be aware of. So part of that is people need to know you. And the second part of that is that you need to ask for these things. And I didn't start doing that, frankly, until I was at Google. I think like when I was at the law firm, my experience was Harvard educated, I have 3 degrees from Harvard. I do excellent work. Clearly that should speak enough, and I should rise through the ranks that way. And I learned kind of the hard way, assuming that I was on track for partner at a certain amount of time, and then was like told a few months before that I was not going to make partner that year and would be deferred a year. I realized that you can assume that if you don't ask, no one's going to ask for you. And I think also doubly just the way my nature, I want to be kind, I want to have good relationships with my folks, keeping my head down and just doing my work. It is situations like that lead to you perhaps being kind of passed over when you think you should not be. So that lesson, when I went to Google, I just took a totally different tact. I was like more vulnerable, develop relationships. And when I saw opportunity, I kind of created the opportunities for myself. I asked to do things. And because we're all excellent, if you ask to do it, people want you to be helpful. They will say yes and allow you to do it. And then the flip side of that is like, once you're doing that, making sure that you're recognized and probably appropriately compensated for the work that you've done.
Wow, that is excellent advice. I hope everyone is listening to that, because those are some definite gems that you just dropped. And also, great to see questions coming in the Q&A. Continue to kind of be posting there. We're happy to kind of ask those as they come up. I do want to, shift a little bit away from the workplace and talk a little bit about the continent, especially in that you're in a very innovative space, seeing kind of health tech develop, both kind of, within the Google ecosystem and elsewhere, as kind of, folks innovate and they invest in other spaces. Have you seen anything in the kind of African health space, or things that you're seeing elsewhere that you wish you would see in the African health or health tech space, from that perspective?
Yeah, there is, health tech, I think on the continent in the last few years has definitely become a thing. I think it's actually really exciting to see. The continent actually, I think, lends itself really well to health technology, in the sense that health technology is usually, this is my view, but in my view, health technology is usually focused on kind of improving healthcare delivery. So making healthcare more accessible, right? So to the extent of, making it more remote. So you don't have to come to the hospital, you don't have to come to the clinic. Like a way of thinking about it is like health tech is a way of kind of extending healthcare outside of the clinical walls. I think that continent is like a fantastic kind of environment to kind of capitalize on health technology in that way. I think the second thing that's kind of really exciting about health tech is that it allows people to kind of get better information about healthcare. So both like your doctor can hopefully make better clinical decisions about you if they have if they have your genomic information. And there's a health tech startup in Nigeria that's trying to kind of like bolster the genomic genomic databases for Africans. There's a few healthcare startups around the continent, and I'm focusing on sub-Saharan Africa, so both like East and West that I'm aware of, that are looking at ways to kind of combine medical records, kind of digitize them, right? So again, like they're more mobile. You travel to Nigeria from Ghana, for example, and you yourself might have access to your medical records, or maybe even your doctor can access the medical records in Ghana. That's not possible. Like when I was in Ghana in 1997, doing my public health work, shadowing in the clinic, like we were writing everything on paper. So there's like efforts, health tech startups kind of doing that as well. And then I think the third, which it's COVID related, is telehealth. And that I put in the bucket of maybe both, right? It allows healthcare to be more accessible because it's mobile, it's remote. And at the same time, it can empower clinicians with better information, because they can kind of collaborate and talk to, if I'm a primary care doctor and I have a patient in front of me that has a neurological condition, perhaps I can kind of talk to doctors, other doctors that have the expertise to help treat that patient. Or even better, the patient themselves can connect with that neurologist to get the care that they need. And all of the things that I've mentioned, there are health tech startups on the continent working in these areas. So I think it's a really exciting time. And for me personally, because I work in the private sector and I have a sense of the way things work, they're getting funding to do that. Because I think that is I mean, that is the challenge for African tech startups, is that unlike in the US, I'll give the US example since I'm here. There's most technology, frankly, innovation is funded by the government. It's NIH, or National Institutes of Health, does research funding. Like people kind of underestimate how much money is funded by the government to kind of get innovation started. And on the continent, that's not where we are in terms of the funding model. And so I think it's incredibly exciting that these health tech startups are attracting outside investment as well to kind of continue their work. So maybe I just lost you. I think you're on mute.
Oh, sorry about that.
There you go.
Excellent. Yeah, I was saying that's excellent. I really like the kind of leapfrog opportunities that some of those might represent. Yeah, and actually, I don't know, shifting a little bit, you talk about how funding is important for some of those kind of endeavors to continue. And I do want to note that you've recently become a partner at How Women Invest, an early stage venture firm, that looks, towards kind of funding women-based ventures. And, wondering if you see yourself moving more into the kind of investment side of things in the future, and if you could speak a little bit to the work at Women Invest and kind of the impact they're having.
It's actually a really good question. So maybe I'll tie this to your question before about like career and like how I kind of navigated to start. So I do this for my team as well, because I see myself as a coach of the team that I lead. I think a good proportion, at least 50% of the work that you're currently doing should make you a little bit uncomfortable. Meaning like you haven't really done it before. You're not 100% certain that you're going to knock it out of the park. And actually it's possible that you're not going to do a good job and you're going to fail. But like in my experience, and I wish someone had told me this earlier because I was very risk averse, right? Like African family, I'm going to study, I'm going to get my straight A's, I'm just going to stay within the box. I found that I have gotten the most opportunities, I've learned the most when I've stepped outside my comfort zone and done something where I'll work hard at it. I'll ask questions, I'll prepare, like I'll situate myself well. So I should be able to succeed at it. But if I don't and I fail, I still learn in that process. So to answer your question about how women invest, so how women invest is something that I wanted to do. One, because I feel very, very deeply that the world would be a better place if like women, if women were kind of more equipped and empowered to live up to their full potential, right? And so I love that how Women Invest was focused on women founders. Doubly excited because we're focused on women founders, but really women of color as well. Because again, I think if you empower women of color, like frankly, like the whole world would be better. I do not have a finance background. As I said, I have a science and legal background. So for me, this is a stretch moving into the investment opportunity, but perhaps because I've been at Google for a long time, I think there's opportunity in thinking very critically about how we're deploying dollars in the private sector. And I think there's a role for private companies to do really, really impactful work in healthcare. And I think it's really important for people that are interested, people that have our experiences and our backgrounds to be part of that conversation, asking those questions and making sure that people are truly thinking about everyone, right? When they're building their tools, when they're deploying deploying their resources and looking at who they should fund. So how Invest came, I'm inspired by the women founders of that organization. And for those reasons, I wanted to contribute. And because health tech is a kind of sexy burgeoning area, a lot of the portfolio companies we're looking at the pitch decks are in the health tech space. So I also felt that I could be helpful in doing that as well.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah.
That's I think when I saw that, I think we talked in the past about how, you know, one issue when folks kind of come into the corporate world is they don't understand the power of that ownership of stock, and kind of, you know, they might take salary, what's long term might not be as good as a deal. So I think kind of moving up the ranks on that side of the house and having more people on that side of the house prescient, I think is good.
Yes, I was in that when I took the Google job and I got my offer. I fell in that category because these private companies, a lot of your salary is in equity. And I was so used to coming from the law firm where like my salary was in cash. I almost downplayed the equity and wanted to exchange it for cash, which would have been a foolish move, frankly. Right. So just like introducing yourself, there's a language people speak. You get a sense of like time value of money and the fact that equity has a lot more upside. It might have risks. It does have risks. We should have be thoughtful about it. But just introducing and kind of forcing yourself to be in those environments and not being afraid to ask questions when you don't understand what's happening in those environments, I think has been incredibly helpful overall. And personally, it's been incredibly helpful for me.
Yeah, no, that's really good advice for folks starting out. And, you know, I think one other question is, I've been lucky enough to meet your beautiful two kids and your amazing husband, Dan, and your incredible house. But how do you kind of keep such a nice household, you know, that personal side of your life together, hitting the gym, doing all the things that a human needs to do, while of course kind of leading Google Health's legal arm, doing a global pandemic, and kind of all from home where you've got this distributed team. How do you kind of manage that balance?
Yes. So I will give credit to my husband, Dan, who you have met, who has helped me realize that I need to prioritize. One, I need to kind of prioritize what's really important to me. And then frankly, like put my time toward those things. So I'll be honest, like I'm one of those folks, but especially when I had my first son, who felt that I should be able to do it all. Right. And it's just not possible. Right. Like like I'll give you an example. Equally important to iron their clothes as well as like go to the park and spend time with them. No, because I value like spending time with my family, spending time with my husband, etc. And so I realized that, and I had kids, we had kids later in life, which is, it's a trade-off. So with that, we had the resources, frankly, to outsource some of the things that were not a priority for me to kind of allow me to spend time on things that are important to me, which is my family, my friends. I do work out. And for me to be good at my work, I'm also, I think I mentioned, like, I'm shy, I'm introverted. I enjoy people, but I get energy by being by myself. And so I like to read, I like to listen to music. And so for me to do well in my job, and I think continue to progress in my job, continue to get promoted in my job, I needed that mix of things for myself. So I outsourced things that are lower priority for me. People have different priorities. So we have someone that helps us drive the kids around. She helps with their laundry. She cooks for us. I don't love to. My husband does the cooking when he has time. I don't like to cook. So I think we've also arrived, again, because I'm older, we've also arrived at a place where our relationship is one where we play to our strengths. So I also thought that everything needs to be split 50-50, and that doesn't really make sense. But let's play to our strengths. And so I think in doing that, right, like I'm the lawyer. So I'm organized, I deal with documents, I'm in the weeds, I will file, I like doing things like that. My husband is, he's trained in business, so he loves finance. We recently remodeled our home, like he organized and like was point on that project, and I totally delegated that to him. So I think like the answer is, I realized I can't do everything all at once. I prioritize what's really important to me. And then I follow that up by spending my time on the things that are really important to me and getting comfortable, which is hard, getting comfortable letting other things go.
Awesome. No, that's super advice. And I think as some of us move into that phase of our life, we need to be keeping track of some of that. Would advise, the group watching, if you do have any questions, I know a couple have come through and we're trying to sprinkle them in, but for the last 20, we'll definitely be kind of weighing a lot on your guys' questions too. So if there's anything you want to ask to the current head of legal for, Google Health, I guess speak now or forever hold your peace. But I think as we're kind of collecting some more of those, one thing I did want to get out of you before kind of moving, because this is something that I think a lot of people see in their careers in legal, is that back and forth between, the private sector and the public sector, and obviously there's trade-offs on both sides. And obviously you've had a very successful and long, career, within the public sector when you're at, the special assistant officer to the commissioner of the US FDA. And so wondering kind of what was behind some of your shifts back and forth, from the government to the private sector. Could you see yourself, going back in the future, or potentially politics?
Yes, not politics, I don't think. I was following you and then you said politics. It's like, I don't think I'm doing that. Let's see. So I actually am one of those folks that thought my dream job would be working in the government. And I'll tell you like what I love about working in government. Your job, like when I worked at the Food and Drug Administration, US Food and Drug Administration, the mission of that agency is to improve the Americans' like public health. Like it's just so pure, right? Like I love that the mission is to help people, and then you get to innovate within that mission to kind of figure out how to make that work. My shifts between private and government, I'll say this, kind of like on the other side of that, probably like, let's say 18 years later, I found that when I'm approached by recruiters, when I'm approached for different opportunities, the fact that I've worked in a relatively senior level position in government and also have private sector experience makes me a unicorn. So to the extent that people are being, and that's what I'm told. So to the extent that people are being really intentional in terms of crafting their careers and they have interest in government service, I loved my 2 years at FDA. I would highly encourage you to consider what season of life you might want to explore that opportunity. But for me, it has been both personally fulfilling. I learned a lot in terms of just how to like navigate and influence in a very large bureaucracy that I use in my work today. And it was just very helpful to my career, frankly. It's great on the resume. You asked like the thinking between the shifts. The way it's kind of funny, like now that I'm in my career and the way I tell the story or the way that the story can be told seems like it was like very seamless and like really intentional. And I knew that I was going to be at FDA in the first 2 years of the Obama administration. Like none of that is true. I would have to say that I knew I was always guided by, as I said, like healthcare was my thing. And I figured, and I wanted to, and I was open-minded about that. My mom was actually helpful in framing this for me. Like nothing's going to be perfect. And so if I could find a healthcare link to whatever work I was doing, it usually meant that I was going to be interested in some of that work and I would do really well in that work. I'll give an example. So after my first summer, my 1L summer, I wanted to work in government. And so I worked in I went to the Department of Justice, and they have a special litigation section in the Civil Rights Department. So it's responsible for the conditions of incarcerated people. And the projects there was looking at juvenile facilities, so very interested in kids, and looking at the mental health condition of juvenile facilities in the US. It was not good. So really kind of tangential, like mental health in juvenile facilities within broader DOJ. But I love the work. I learned a ton from the work. I learned what I loved about the law and what I did not, because it was a litigation and I'm not a litigator. But that was like a fantastic experience. So I think the sense is, so I've been guided by finding what I'm really passionate about, because I'm usually good at it. And for me, it's healthcare. And 2, relationships. I got that FDA job because the person that I interned for when I was getting my PREGA policy degree, so I worked in government again. So I went to the legislative bank. I worked on the Hill. I worked for a doctor who was a health policy advisor. Fast forward 7 years, he's nominated by Obama to be the number 2 person at FDA. He knew, because I had opened my mouth at that time, that government service was something I wanted to do. And then I reached out to him usually like once or twice a year. And in one of the reach outs, he's like, I just got nominated. I think there might be an opportunity for me to bring you over to the commissioner's office. Would you be interested? So that's how these things have happened to me. And again, it's like being vulnerable, telling people what you want, asking questions. The worst they can say is no, but at least they know. And I think my story also says things happen at their own time, right? Like I mentioned this to the man 7 years ago, and then 7 years pass and he has the opportunity and he kind of brings me to FDA. So maybe I'll end the answer saying, some of it has been opportunistic but in the sense that I've let people know what I'm interested in, and I've been always open and willing to kind of take the opportunity when I presented myself. And I would highly recommend folks do government service as well as private sector service if that's something that they're interested in.
Awesome. No, that's excellent. And yeah, there's a lot in that, and things when you look back can look hindsight's 2020, but
yes,
when you're going through it, it's rarely that.
It was not that. It was like this, but it was generally going up. So I was pleased with that.
Nice. And you know, a question that I think is coming through as well from the folks is, you know, and I know that you were very steadfast on healthcare, which I think is very unique to your story, but we've seen questions around, hey, what's your advice to a young female lawyer who's starting a legal career on specialization? You know, should I specialize early or later in their career? And I know you've had your experiences, but what would you say to someone in that situation?
Yes, that's a great question. So it's all great questions. My sense is I would hesitate, this is my personal opinion, I would hesitate to specialize too narrowly in your early in your career. So I'll give you my example. So I ended up taking a 3-week, I did 2 things. I took a 3-week course in law school on FDA law. I'd never heard of FDA law. I didn't know that there were regulatory lawyers that helped companies get medical technologies out into the world. It was the first time I was hearing about this area of law, and I loved it. I only took it for 3 weeks. Then I took another class at the School of Public Health, kind of focused on how do you kind of incentivize drug and medical technology development in the developing world, right? When people might not be able to kind of pay the prices companies want them to pay for their products. Those two classes, I kind of fell in love with like medical technologies and FDA law, specifically within healthcare. When I left law school, because I was in love with that specialized area, I actually applied to the US FDA to join our Office of Chief Counsel and got a role there. And so I debated this is where I think I love, like within healthcare, do I go deep right away? Or do I kind of stay a little bit more general to kind of allow myself to pivot? Clearly, I decided to go to a law firm to allow myself the ability to pivot. And for me personally, that has been invaluable. But I really think it depends on how much you love the area you might be considering specializing in. I have realized now in my career that I love being a generalist as a lawyer because you're closer to the business. right? And so I didn't say this when I was saying like my head of legal, like I have a team. My team is the one that's like embedded with the product teams and doing the legal advising. Like my work is like talking to the senior executives and thinking strategically about like what moves we're gonna make. If there's like a really hard legal problem that's a little gray, that those types of issues kind of get escalated to me for me to make a decision. But I'm not in the weeds, I'm in general. And I realized that I got this job because when I went to Google, again, Google does so much stuff. It allowed me to expose myself to different areas. So when I was looking for different opportunities and being interviewed for different roles, I could say, oh, I've seen a little bit of litigation. Oh, I've seen a little bit of this because of the world that I'm in. So it's a long-winded way of saying, if you really love this specialization, like go for it. In my experience, I think carefully about it though, because it does pigeonhole you. And as you get more senior in your career, it gets harder to kind of tell your story more broadly if you want to pivot.
Awesome. No, that's really good, and I'm sure the people asking those questions can heed that advice. And we're rounding up on time. I think we've got time for one more question. Just doing a read of the room. A lot of the sentiment seems to be around what's next for Afia Asamoah. I have to Google Health in the future. Maybe where you're traveling when things open up again. It's a broad question. I guess to leave folks off on, what do you see as kind of next steps for you in your career, and how do you think about things like that?
Yeah, it's a really good question. I mean, the immediate kind of flippant answer is that I was planning to be in Ghana last year, and so I plan to be in Ghana next year when we can travel. So that is definitely next. In terms of my career, it's funny. Like when I celebrated my 5-year anniversary within the Google family, my husband was like, "You've been here 5 years. Like, what's going on?" Because up to then I had experience of like 2.5, 3 years, and then I've had an opportunity to kind of broaden myself out, and so I've gone to take another opportunity. What's next for me? I'm really excited about this direction, like that How Women Invest provides to me. In terms of just getting a better sense of investing, getting a sense of like how people invest their money and trying to kind of influence and shape that direction in ways that are helpful to all populations. I care about Black and Brown people and women in particular. Another angle of that is I'm now just exploring kind of public board service in the States. Again, it's another opportunity to be in the room with really senior decision makers in different types of companies and asking questions and trying to hold them account to do things to make folks better. So I'm in conversation and exploring that as an avenue. Long term, kind of like the pinnacle of my career, is that I would love to be in a position to be advising kind of like governments probably on the continent, frankly, on kind of healthcare technology and healthcare delivery. I think of my career and kind of life in terms of seasons. I have 2 small kids, 5 and 7. So I'm not going to be spending like most of my time now in this season on a plane traveling. Again, going back to how I'm prioritizing, I want to spend time with them. But they're not going to be young forever. And so when I think like kind of further out in the pinnacle of my career, I want to be able to do that. And frankly, I want to use this time to have the financial flexibility to do that. Right. So kind of being very intentional in terms of how I'm doing that and kind of accruing wealth for my family. So I have a little bit of flexibility and don't have to worry about that as much in 10, 15 years when I do want to do that type of work as well.
Awesome. That is beautiful. I'm sure this is not the last many of us have heard of Afia Asamoah. If anything, it's a sneak peek for folks. So definitely, she's definitely someone to watch if you haven't been watching already. I know we have more questions coming through. Unfortunately, we are effectively at time, but do really want to thank you for taking time out of your busy schedule to kind of engage with folks today. Really, thank you so much, Afia.
Well, thank you for the conversation. Thanks for folks that tuned in. Connect with me on LinkedIn. Let me know, give me context so I know that you're connecting via this conversation. But I really enjoyed it and looking forward to see what all of you guys do in this world. It inspires and excites me when I think about all of the kind of brain power we have as an entity and how we can use that to make things better for so many people. So thank you, Meme.
Thank you, and thank you to the Innovation Law Club Africa for creating this opportunity, setting this and other great conversations and panels. So thanks so much, everyone. I think recording should be available. There'll be more information on that. But as noted, feel free to reach out to us on LinkedIn, give us any context, and have a great week.
Great. Thank you. Bye, Meme.
See you. Bye.